Namaskar, Nileshok here in part 2 of the three-part series discussing evidence from geography, anthropology, and genetics, which shows impressive corroboration for 5561 BCE as the year of the Mahabharata war. So, in the first part, we looked at the world geography as known to Indian civilization going back to more than 14,000 years ago. We began with the Ramayana, references from Valmiki Ramayana, and we discussed how consistent are the references from Valmiki Ramayana with that of the Mahabharata. Two historical texts describing key epochs of Indian civilization separated by more than 7,000 years. Very impressive. In this part, we are going to look at the anthropology evidence as it relates to the specific event of the Mahabharata war. So let me start sharing PowerPoint with you. Okay, so what do we want to discuss within this anthropology section? First, if you recall the story of the Mahabharata text, the historical event of the Mahabharata text. Kauravas and Pandavas, they're fighting against each other. In Kaurava's side, we have Duryodhan. You can think of as the main character who wants this fight to happen. On the other side, we have the five Pandavas. You can think of Bhima as the key person who is asking for a justice, and therefore the war is going to now happen. Various kings with their armies, they come and join either of the two sides. What we have here on the screen at the top is the Kaurava side, and the total army was amounted to 18 Aukshahini. Okay, and we'll not go into the details of how much one Aukshahini comes out to. I'll give you a brief summary in a second. But look at some of the key warriors that are mentioned, and I also want you to note down their geographical location. In the first part, if you remember, when Arjun had gone in the north direction, which also included some of the areas in the west direction, the way Sugriv had described in Valmiki Ramayana. And I described Arjun going as far west as, I would say, today's Turkey. Now that is the same description that I'm reading from Valmiki, from Mahabharata. So I'm not saying it's my own creation. I'm simply referring to Mahabharata text, but trying to put it in the modern context. Then I also mentioned the modern day Baghdad as the possible place called Prague Jyotish. And the place is mentioned both in Ramayana and also Mahabharata. In the context of a Mahabharata, when the place is mentioned in the descriptions of Arjun going to Prague Jyotish, there is a description of he meeting King Bhagadatta. And I also mentioned that the Baghdad, the way the local people will say it, it sounds like Bhagada, Bhagada, all right? As if like in the name Bhagadatta, the last portion is dropped. That Bhagadatta is one of the key warrior on the Kaurava side. And he brought with him one Aukshahini army, okay, to fight in this battle. Then there is a mention of a Shalya. He is a king of Madra. Now, it's important to understand that Madra and Uttara Madra and also Uttara Kuru. These are the regions which are in our times the area that is east of the Caspian Sea. Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and many other small countries there, just north of Afghanistan, even possibly portions of Afghanistan, the modern day Afghanistan, and also the western part of what is called modern day China. Okay, so that's that area of Madra. Especially Shalya may be from a specific location within that area, but again, remember, he's bringing one Aukshayani army with him. Then there is a Karna, which is coming from eastern part of India, the modern times Bangladesh, and also the Indian state of West Bengal and broader area around that place. Then we have a Kritavarma. He's coming from the southern side from a Dwarka, so west southwest area you can say, or central west area of modern day India. Then Jayadratha is coming from Sindhava, which you can think of the southern Pakistan, the today's southern Pakistan, and actually be part of Iran and so on. Then we have Sudakshina coming from Cambodge. And I'll mention few other names. Balika from a Balik. And I want those people who are truly interested in understanding the context of this geography and why these people I'm mentioning and even their specific areas and what that has to do with the genetics evidence, the latest genetic evidence. I would encourage you to read Mahabharat, look at any sources you have access to, and become familiar with where are these regions, okay, as understood by us to the best of our knowledge in the greater uh, greater India and the outskirts of India. Okay, there is Shakuni from Gandhar, which is essentially Afghanistan, and then there's the Susharma for Trigartha and Kurus, of course, from the northern portion of today's India. On the other side, you have a Satyaki from a Vrishni clan. Again, I would say that is from the central India, but also the west, central, south, central, west part of modern day India. Then there are other different kings coming from different parts of India and could be some parts outside India, such as, for example, Ghatotkaч and coming with one Aukshahini army. Now, we don't know the exact location of Ghatotkaч, but it's easy to speculate that it won't be surprising if we say some of his influence included into parts of Africa or parts of other South Asia, such as Indonesia and whatnot. The reason I'm mentioning this picture is very important if we have to understand the genetics evidence as much as we have to understand the geography, because we need to understand geography in order to make sense of this Aukshahini evidence. So total we have 18 Aukshahini army ready to fight, 11 Aukshahini on one side and 7 Aukshahini on the other side. Now remember I mentioned Bhagadatta. Just quickly quoting a few shloka from the Sabha Parva where I mentioned Arjun had gone in the north direction. So I'll quickly fill those areas where Arjun, when he went to this place called Prag Jyotish, and if you see those verses there, it says Tatra Raja Mahanasid Bhaga Datto Vishampate. When he went to Prag Jyotish, the king ruling Prag Jyotish at that time in that north-westerly direction was King Bhagadatta. Okay, and then from there he went to different places like the Chin, the modern day Chin, okay, Kirata, that will be the part of Tibet and Nepal and so on, but not too far east because the Bhima has indeed gone in that direction. Okay, and some of these warriors in these armies, they came from all these different regions. Okay, very important to remember that. All right, now let's quickly get into how much that Aukshahini accounts for. You can read the details on the screen. I'm not going to go into the details in terms of the number of chariots, the number of elephants, number of infantry soldiers, etc. in a given Aukshayani. This is one description that is given in the Mahabharata text itself. You may find if you look around that there may be some variations. That's not relevant for what we are discussing right now. The bigger point I want to bring out is this, that based on this definition of Aukshani from the Mahabharata text, if we do the addition of all the warriors fighting in this Mahabharata war, it amounts to 4 million individuals. Okay, that 3,936,600. We don't have to take the exact number there, approximately close enough, 4 million individuals. Now, the question we need to ask is this number very big or very small? Now, many times people make the comparison with number of warriors, number of soldiers fighting in the World War I, World War II, and so on. And those are all useful comparisons. But the most important comparison that we need to do here is to see if we can estimate, to the best of our knowledge, how did this 4 million number appeared or sounded like in comparison to the world population of that time, or at least the population in the area of influence of India and the surrounding regions. What you will find is our knowledge and our understanding and our estimates for the world population, as soon as we go back beyond few hundred years, is actually very sketchy. Okay, we truly don't have an idea. In fact, I'm going to show you a chart. These are various estimates starting with our times and going back to 10,000 years, like 10,000 BC, for example. And what do you find? So that one is, think of this as the zero AD BC, CE, BCE. Okay, so 2000 years ago. And from there, we are going backwards. The important area for our uh, context is that between 6,000 and 5,000 BC. So that is why I have highlighted it. Many other researchers have simply not given the estimates, but those who have given the estimates, for example, look at this, what is that column, fourth column there, between 6th millennium and 5th millennium, it is referring to the estimate of 11 million people, 18 million people. Now this is the world population around the globe, and you can see some other estimates at 5 million, and then another estimate 5 to 20 million. What does that tell you? Whatever is the actual population, we only have these estimates, but even the error is actually order of magnitude higher than the estimate itself. So if we say 5 million, but it can be actually 3 times more. Okay, definitely it cannot be 3 times less. We cannot go in the negative direction, but do understand that all we know is very crude estimates. But if we can just look at these numbers and just for a minute assume that those are the real number or those are the reasonable estimates of that time, still the important point to note down, especially if we look at 5 million and those numbers say 11 million, 4 million people, exclusively men, because this population is both male and female, fighting is a big deal, guys. Big deal in 6th millennium BCE. All right. Okay. So with that, actually, I want to take a break and just summarize and leave this part 3 for the third part. So we looked at the world geography as Indian civilization knew more than 14,000 years ago. Also, around more than 7,500 years ago, that is at the time of Ramayana and then at the time of Mahabharata, we see the consistency of descriptions. And actually, I did not take you through the details of it. I will encourage all of you to read Kishkinda Kand, chapters around 40, 41, 42, 43, where Sugriva is giving descriptions to Vanaras in all 4 directions. And then in Mahabharata text, Sabha Parva, and chapters around 23 to 30, somewhere in that region, where the 4 Pandava brothers go in the 4 different directions. And especially try to match how consistent the geography is, but also the kingdoms. Okay, so the kingdoms also have longevity there. Okay, So the different players are playing their game, but in a way, the names are retained. To be fair, frankly, even after 7,500 years after the Mahabharata war, it's very impressive that number of these names are retained in the Indian geography, okay, or actually even outer geography. Going back 2000 years, we find the Greek records again accurately pinpointing to the specific regions of Indian subcontinent as Madra, Uttara Madra, they called it, or Uttara Kuru, they called it Uttara Kuru, and so on. Then we looked at the anthropology evidence, and the important point I want to make is this, that the warriors who participated into the Mahabharata war, they had come from the mainland India as we see today's India. They had come from, if you go in the northwest direction, as far as Turkey. And if they were beyond that, they were coming from beyond that, we don't know that. We don't have a specific evidence to make that claim. If you look in the northern direction, they definitely came from a Uttara Kuru, Uttara Madra, which is what modern day area east of Caspian Sea. Obviously, of course, the Iran, of course, Turkey, of course, Iraq, the Bhagadatta from uh, Pragjyotish, which I am saying very likely, more than likely, modern day Baghdad. And if you go on the south side, again, we have a Ghatotkaч. In the central India, we have people from Krishna's Dwarka area, and there are people coming from the eastern bloc. Okay, so from West Bengal, modern day Bangladesh, Assam, going all the way to Myanmar, and of course, possibly going further to Laos and Thailand, possibly Indonesia, and so on. Okay. Now, in the third part, we are going to synthesize this data with a latest genetics research paper. When I say latest paper, that is 5-6 year old, that's very latest, and try to make sense of these historical events, the geographical participation that is there based on our ancient narratives in this historical war, where 4 million people fought and most of them died. All of them were men. And just I showed you from anthropology estimates for populations of the world, these numbers are extremely significant. And we hope, we would have hoped that maybe they left some imprint into the anthropological or genetics records for posterity. The answer is yes, that they left an impressive record, and we are going to look at that in